The Roundhouse Analysis. The Roundhouse is a story about a boy named Joe who's 13, and he lives on a reservation in North Dakota, and his mother, Geraldine, gets raped, and he spends the rest of the story trying to find out who the rapist is and trying to get justice for his mother and his family. Being on a reservation doesn't make it easy because of the Indian law that they have and all of the, or how the Indian law isn't that reliable for them. All of the changes that their family goes through results in one big change that their whole family goes through, and everybody else changes because of it. First literary device I picked was point of view, and the quote was, "You're always tired, but you sleep all the time." This shows the point of view of Joe because he's telling the story and how his age really affects how he manages and deals with his mother being raped. And it basically shows how Joe may not be able to process exactly what is happening to his mother at this time, but all he knows is that she's sleeping all the time, but she's saying she's tired. But like in his mind, he's thinking that if she's sleeping, then why should she be tired? When really it's deeper than that, and she was raped and everything else. Like trying to deal with that and cope with that is going to be hard for her. The next literary device I picked was symbol, and I used Basil's representation of the Indian law when he stacked up the silverware on the casserole. And I said that it symbolizes, or what he made symbolizes the Indian law because um, the casserole itself was not a good foundation for it. Like it's already starting to not be a good representation of the law, or to be, yeah, not to represent the law, like the Indian law, not well. And then, of course, the silverware that's being stacked up, it's obviously not going to be held up that well because of um, it's silverware and it's in a casserole. So I just said that that represented the Indian law because the Indian law is like unreliable and it's not very great. The next literary device I picked was the foreshadowing when the author includes talking about Cappy's death, and I said that that the author used the foreshadowing because we know that Cappy's going to die at the end, but then she creates Cappy's character who like she creates Cappy's character who is always there for Joe and they're best friends and everything. So it's interesting how she includes that he's going to die before we even get to know him. So and then when Cappy does end up dying, the reader already has a strong connection with Cappy because of his role in the story being by Joe the whole time, so that it makes it a little bit harder for the readers to kind of cope with how Cappy dies, even though we already knew he was going to die earlier. The next literary device I picked was imagery, and I talked about when he was describing Sonia, and specifically, I think this was when he was seeing her earlier, like talking about her cotton candy hair and her running suit and everything. And I basically Joe is describing Sonia because he it shows how much attention he's paying of her, and most or like most recognizably his her physical qualities, nothing really else. Like he just describes like her hair and her running suit and um her ponytail and everything like that. So it's not really about like Sonia like personality wise or like what she's good at or anything like that. It's just like the outside of her and just her physical attributes. That shows like what Joe thinks about, and um like Joe's age again, kind of showing him how he's 13. He's not really going to be thinking about anything other than like her body and like what she's wearing. And it's interesting how he says how he includes that her running suit with had the top three-quarters unzipped because we all know what Joe thinks about. Okay, the text to self connection. I talked about how we can relate to Joe because not specifically his mother being raped, but knowing how a 13-year-old really does need his own mother. And we can um, sympathize with him because at the age of 13, we really depend on our mothers. And I know when I was 13, I depended on my mother a lot. And so for him to have to lose his mother for that period of time and um, like basically live by himself, like him and his dad having to cope with that, I can relate to that. And right now I'm living with just my dad and my mom is working overseas, so I can really relate to that. Not talking to her every day and everything like that. So yeah. And then the text to text connection, I connected it to the Kite Runner, and I talked about their relationships, like Cappy and Joe, and then Amir and Hassan. How it's kind of like a submissive dominant relationship with Amir and Hassan. How Hassan was more submissive, but then he also had like the stronger qualities, like he was um like more brave than Amir, and he would actually do something to the bullies when they bullied him, like when SF came. And it also goes with how Joe and Cappy, how Joe kind of has the better life, like Amir had the better life, but then Cappy has like the better like qualities as like you would want a 13 to have. How he's like how they kind of like all look up to Cappy and all the girls like him and everything like that. Like for a 13-year-old, that's like important and everything else. So, and I also talked about the loyalty between both of the um pairs of characters. Like Hassan was really loyal to Amir, and then like Cappy and Joe are really loyal to each other, like as friends. Like they're best friends and they do everything together. And yeah. So the text to world connection, I talked about the reservation, just the author bringing in the reservation, how people don't really know a lot about Indian reservations and life on a reservation. So her including that was really interesting because it gives people like an idea of the reservations and how also the rape on the reservation, which rape happens everywhere, but we learned that um rape really, well, we don't learn. We know we know how rape can affect people, and even though she's living on a reservation, she still gets raped. She still goes through the same process and everything else. It's just a little harder on her with the law situation and everything else because she's on that reservation. For the setting, I talked about the how the Roundhouse is set on a reservation in North Dakota in 1988, and it plays an important role in the story because it is a reservation. So they don't have the same laws and everything. And so when Geraldine gets raped, they have to try and figure out where she got raped and when like her rapist would be able to be prosecuted or anything like that because that's really important in like the laws and like if it's the United States law or the reservation law. Also, criminals getting away with crimes on reservations, like the setting of being a reservation, like the stigma that reservations do have more crime and everything else is already put into the back of your mind, knowing that they are on a reservation. My favorite quotes were Joe when he says, "We were not churchgoers. This is our ritual, our breaking bread, our communion." I like this quote because it basically like gives me like the feeling of like them being a family and them doing things together and it not being like something out of the ordinary. Like that's usually what they do and they had a routine and everything else and that it was really kind of special to them. And the next one was like one of my favorites was when he said, "My father had bought an ugly new clock." And to me, this quote, this part really just makes me think of Basil and like how hard he really is trying to keep up with the house and everything else, and how he really cares for Geraldine. And he went out and bought a clock, even though it's ugly, but like it still shows the effort and everything. And the next one is, "It's over, Geraldine," my father said, terrified, trying to hush her. "It's all right now. You're safe." And I like this quote because it shows again Basil really caring for Geraldine and um, trying to comfort her and everything else. And then the last quote, "Did you say those things to drive me away?" This was said by Linda, and I like this quote because she is like a genuine person despite everything that has happened to her. Like her life has like not been the greatest, but she is still like able to hold herself together and give her kidney to her brother who's a rapist and a terrible person to her. But I think I like this quote because like she's still herself and Um, she's really strong as a person. So for the different perspectives, I did Linda's story, and I did the archetype archetypal perspective, and I said from this perspective, Linda's decision to give Lark a kidney shows her what kind of human she is and how like her life experience kind of influenced her decision. Like her not having a good life, like she might be able to just say like, well, her family's already not good. Like what else does she have to lose? So from the feminist perspective, I said Lark is like a horrible person and he doesn't want to be held by his sister, and Linda represents someone who's strong and just trying to save her brother's life. And then the other scene I did was Sanjay and Joe with Mujim's birthday gift. And I said from the feminist perspective, Joe is seen by Sanjay as like every other guy. Like she actually snaps on him and tells him, and he gets upset because he knows it's true. And I said that from the feminist perspective, Sanjay is really just trying to empower herself the only way that she knows how, the only way she can get attention, and by doing what she does. From the Marxist perspective in this scene, Mushim like is has the advantage over Sanjay. Like if we're talking about class or anything, like he seems like he's the more wise, looked up to person compared to Sonya, who has been through so much and is like lower class. So um I just said again, Sandra wants to feel valued and appreciated. Like the wealth that she might be looking for through this perspective is like just value as a person. So for my final analysis, I said that I appreciated the Roundhouse and I enjoyed the different perspective of the characters since it's set up on a reservation and I don't see much of that in my life. Like it was interesting to read about it and see what like a little peek inside like Native American life and everything else. And also how it tied into real world issues like the rape. I like that. So I said I'd rate it 7 out of 10 because like I was into the novel and like I liked the message behind it, but I wouldn't read it again. And like there was times when I really wanted to keep reading it, and then there was times when I didn't. So it wasn't terrible. I did like it, but I mean it wasn't the best book. So, but I did like it.